It was my sophomore year of college, and I was living on the top floor of a 17-story dorm building. Our floor was designated as the computer science floor, which meant we had an interesting mix of residents. There were about 50 of us in total, split evenly between guys and girls. The catch was, while all the guys were stereotypical computer science majors, think skinny, nerdy types, the girls were a completely different story. As it turned out, none of the girls were actually computer science majors. They had simply waited too long to choose their rooms and ended up stuck with whatever was left. So we had this bizarre dynamic of 25 of the nerdiest guys you could imagine living alongside 25 attractive girls who had zero interest in coding or anything remotely related to our field of study. A few weeks into the semester, we learned it was one of the guys' birthdays. He was the epitome of the computer science stereotype: lanky, socially awkward, and more comfortable with lines of code than conversation. A group of us, including some of the girls, got together and decided we wanted to do something special for his birthday. That's when someone floated the idea of hiring a dancer. Looking back, I'm not sure why we thought this was a good idea. Maybe it was a misguided attempt to help him break out of his shell, or perhaps we were just bored and looking for some excitement. Whatever the reason, we ran with it. We started calling around to various agencies, but to our surprise and frustration, none of them were willing to send a dancer to a college dorm. In hindsight, this should have been our first clue that maybe this wasn't such a great plan. But we were determined, and finally, after what felt like dozens of calls, we found a place that agreed to send someone. The guy on the phone quoted us a price of $250. Now, being broke college students, this might as well have been $1 million to us. I remember looking at my own bank account and seeing a balance that wouldn't even cover a pizza, let alone contribute to hiring a dancer. But we were committed to the idea now, and that's when we had what we thought was a stroke of genius. We decided to spread the word throughout the entire dorm building that we were hiring a dancer for a birthday party. We figured if we charged everyone $5 at the elevator, we could easily cover the cost and maybe even have some left over for snacks or drinks. Looking back, the logistics of this plan were questionable at best, but at the time, it seemed foolproof. As the day of the party approached, excitement and nervousness built in equal measure. We rearranged the furniture in our floor's lounge, setting up chairs in a circle with one in the center for the birthday boy. We were like kids planning a surprise party, giggling and shushing each other every time the guest of honor walked by. When the night finally arrived, people started showing up in droves. Word had spread faster than we anticipated, and soon our small lounge was packed with about 50 people, all crammed in and buzzing with anticipation. The birthday boy sat in the center chair, looking equal parts excited and terrified. Then, the moment we'd all been waiting for arrived. The dancer showed up, and it was not what we expected. She looked like she had just stepped out of a trailer park, wearing a schoolgirl outfit that might have fit her when she was actually in school, but at 30-something and with a few extra pounds, it was far from flattering. The look on her face when she saw the crowd waiting for her was priceless. Clearly, she had been expecting a much smaller gathering. Realizing we had no music prepared, because of course we didn't, we were computer science majors after all, she decided to start by going around the room and giving everyone a brief dance. It was awkward, to say the least, but nothing compared to what came next. When she finally turned her attention to the birthday boy, things went from awkward to downright bizarre. She stood him up and, to everyone's shock, proceeded to strip him completely naked in front of the entire crowd. The poor guy looked like he was about to pass out, his face redder than I thought humanly possible. What followed was a series of increasingly uncomfortable acts. She spanked him with his own belt, wrapped money around certain body parts and removed it with her mouth, and performed other moves that I'm sure she thought were sexy but in this context were just cringe-inducing. All the while, our birthday boy stood there, clearly wishing the floor would open up and swallow him whole. The rest of us sat in stunned silence, unable to look away from the train wreck unfolding before us. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, horrifying, but impossible to ignore. The air in the room was thick with discomfort, punctuated only by the occasional nervous giggle or sharp intake of breath. When it was finally over, there was a moment of stunned silence before everyone practically ran for the exits. It was as if we had all simultaneously realized the magnitude of what we had just witnessed and couldn't get out of there fast enough. The birthday boy, still beet red and now fully clothed, bolted to his room and didn't emerge for days. In the aftermath of the party, our floor was abuzz with whispered conversations and nervous laughter. We all felt a mix of guilt for putting our friend through such an ordeal and a strange sense of shared trauma from having witnessed it. It took weeks before any of us could look the birthday boy in the eye, and even longer before anyone dared to bring up the incident. Looking back on that night, I'm struck by how naive and foolish we were. We had no idea what we were getting into, and our well-intentioned surprise had backfired spectacularly. It was a harsh lesson in the importance of thinking things through and considering the potential consequences of our actions. In the years since, this story has become something of a legend among those of us who were there. It's the kind of tale that gets told at reunions and late-night gatherings, always met with a mix of laughter and disbelief. For those of us who witnessed it firsthand, it's a reminder of the bizarre and often misguided adventures of our college years. As for the birthday boy, he eventually emerged from his shell and even managed to laugh about the incident years later. It became a strange sort of bonding experience for our floor, a shared secret that brought us closer together even as it mortified us. In the end, while I wouldn't recommend hiring a dancer for a dorm party to anyone, I can't deny that it gave us a story we'll never forget. It was a night that perfectly encapsulated the weird, wonderful, and often uncomfortable experience of college life. And hey, at least we learned early on that sometimes, the best birthday gift is just a simple card and maybe a cake. No dancers required.